Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Justice Show. I'm your host, Tracy Siska. I'm also the executive director of the Chicago Justice Project. You can find more out about our transparency and accountability work at chicagojustice.org. We are in the process of launching a new website, so I think it is live now. You can drop us comments in the you can drop comments on any of the platforms and let us know what you think of the new design. On today's show, we play an interview we did recently with 11th District State Rep Ann Williams about the Protecting Household Privacy Act, currently working its way through the General Assembly. We also later then talk about a Sun-Times article on foot pursuit saying, in the title, excuse me, talks about experts, but then has basically no experts in the article. A bill in the General Assembly just being introduced by, I think it's Representative LaShawn Ford, trying to force officers to go through critical race theory and other classes related to race to try to elevate the police accountability system. Not so sure about that one. Mayor Lightfoot's refusal to follow the law and bring sunshine to decades of police accountability files. I don't think she's that wrong on the fact that it won't make a difference going forward for the most part, but she is still wrong. And we end on a segment about two former CPD superintendents who jointly signed a letter complaining about the police accountability system in Chicago and how it limited their ability and discretion and power. That is correct, it does, but I don't know anyone that cares about reforming and policing that would get rid of the system and just trust the superintendents to do it. That is completely devoid of any historical context. So we're going to talk all about that in tonight's show, but first, I'm going to talk about CJP Nation. The Nation is a program where our volunteers and interns get together and they work on a bunch of things collectively. First, crowdsource research projects, and that's a mixture of straight up research, which we have some publishing soon on our website, but also policy research. We're researching into the Coots Alternative Response System. We are looking at homicide review commissions, fatality review commissions, whether to bring them to Chicago. You can also get engaged in social media activism, public policy advocacy. You can even fundraise for us if you want and support our transparency work as we expand across the country. Hopefully soon in the links, in the comments, you're going to see a link posted that's a Zoom link for tonight. Our meeting is every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central. Come and join us, figure out what we're doing, and see if you want to get involved. Okay, segment number one. It's our interview with Representative 11th District State Rep Ann Williams from a day or two ago, basically about this household privacy or Protecting Household Privacy Act. I think it's fascinating. I think it's definitely called for, and it's basically setting up or mandating, I guess is the better way to say it, mandating that the police get warrants like they do for any other thing they try to seize from you. Get warrants in all situations except something that is urgent, and they can articulate a reason that it is urgent or has to be done immediately. Other than that, they have to get a warrant, and this is talking about Ring doorbells, your Alexa, your Google HomePod. I don't know what the Apple thing is called. Any one of those. Right now, up until this bill gets made law, it is being haphazardly done. Some jurisdictions we think are getting warrants, some aren't. They're not really sure about it. So this bill is looking to mandate it across the state and make it consistent. And they're basically just adding household data from household items, digital data from household items that were never dreamed of existing 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. They're adding them the same protection to the data there that they would to your cell phone or your computer or paper files from your house or your office or anything like that. So we'll be back after the interview and talk about it. So you represent the 11th district, which is a huge chunk of the north side. Do you also have suburbs, or is it all in the city?
I have all Chicago. I'm a proud Chicago representative and resident.
Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to be talking today for our audience, the Protecting Household Privacy Act, or HB 2553. So, why do citizens in Illinois need a bill that protects their household electronic data?
Well, as technology advances and we have more and more ways to access data, there are more and more opportunities for our data, personal private data, to be accessed, either by private companies or in some cases by law enforcement. So it's critical that the legislature put protections in place to ensure that as these new technologies are available, we ensure civil liberties protections for the utilization of the data that they collect.
So, is this and this would be unusual in the criminal justice sphere, at least from my experience, is this preemptive, or is this something that this is law enforcement has already been getting access to this data and we're trying to stop something that's been ongoing?
Well, that's a really interesting question because we know that in order to go into someone's home and collect information or evidence, you need to have a warrant. And we know because of the laws that we passed over the years that in order to utilize someone's cell phone and search a cell phone for information, you need to also get a warrant. But when it comes to household devices like a Ring doorbell or an Alexa, for example, it's not clear. The law is not clear how law enforcement can access information, when they can access it, and what standard is utilized. So some law enforcement agencies probably do seek warrants, others do not. What we want to do is require a consistent standard in Illinois for law enforcement to use when trying to access data on those personal household devices.
So, in this process, is basically, I would say, just including these household devices and new digital devices as they come up, but they're basically including them in any way they would need to get information from me prior to this. Because if they were asking for public records of my or paper records, they would have. I think most people would say, no, you obviously have to get a warrant if you're going to come get them, or you can ask me, but I have the right to say no. Is that so? Basically, this isn't developing a whole new process. This is about adding household device data to an existing process that I think Americans take for that I think
Right.
American no worries. I think Americans take this for granted, right? And so this is just adding those devices to an already existing process.
Absolutely. It's our basic civil liberties protections against search and seizure without a warrant. And we're just applying it to a new device. And I'm confident that we'll be back in front of the General Assembly when some new technology develops and evolves to ask for these same protections.
Yeah, and I want to commend you on getting ahead of this, if that is what this is really, because typically when you see legislators, they're usually far behind the process. Um, and it's like cats out of the bag. It's like the cats and all their kittens, and all their kittens are out of the bag before they get to this. So I appreciate this. So let's if we can dig a little deeper, what kind of data, what kind of devices are we thinking this legislation covers, and what kind of data is involved in those devices?
Well, we are defining a household electronic device as a device that is primarily intended for use within your household. So not your computer or your iPad or your cell phone, but something like a Ring doorbell, Alexa, a Google device, all those new devices that make it so interesting and fun to ask for a recipe or the weather just by yelling out the name of the device. I personally don't have them. Still a little bit wary of them in terms of the collection of data personally, but for those that have them and love using them, it's important to ensure there's protections and that data, just like any other item in your home, cannot be accessed by law enforcement without going through the proper procedure.
So basically, in Illinois, it was, at least we believe it was, to some degree, a practice of some departments to access this data without needing to get a warrant.
Well, it's just not clear.
Okay.
And that's the problem. I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about getting ahead of an issue. Technology is advancing so quickly, it's almost impossible for the law to keep up. But what we're doing gradually over time is as technologies develop, we're finding ways to ensure that a warrant needs to be obtained in order to get access for the data. And that's a basic civil liberties issue. Years ago, when drones were the thing, drones were everywhere. We were talking a lot about
Mhm.
drones. We passed a law and I sponsored a law to provide that you needed a warrant to access information collected via a drone, because law enforcement agencies will be able to use the drones without protection. So what we need to do is continually update the law to ensure that your personal data is protected. And it's taken, I think, on a heightened importance based on the events of the past 4 or 5 years or so. I know that for the Latino community, this issue is particularly of concern because of issues related to the ICE agency. You see these agencies that can access data without any restrictions, and that's a real concern for people that are concerned about access without a warrant. And you see in some cases law enforcement agencies will push the limit in terms of civil liberties issues. So what we're doing is really focusing on protecting private personal data. That's what we did in the past. That's what we want to do in the future. You pointed out this doesn't really change our standard at all for access of private information and data. It just expands another method for obtaining that data.
Yeah, so here's my last question. I'm thrilled that these types of bills are being done. I'm spent many years, 25 sadly, working on the police accountability system in Chicago. And the events of late show just how well that's working, unfortunately. But I have switched to focusing on the system, focusing on legislation and having legislators restrict in detail what powers the justice system can use. And the fact that I think that's incredibly important. So my last question for you is, go ahead.
I was going to say, this really is a check and balance on law enforcement. And we need to make sure it's very clear how and when law enforcement can access someone's personal private data. And that's important to all of us. Some people say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. You can have access to my data, but that's just not how it works. Collectively, we need to ensure that law enforcement acts responsibly within the confines of the constitutional prohibitions on illegal search and seizure. That's just a basic level as to how we should be operating.
Right. And I think good police officers, and there are many, welcome this because it clearly delineates the process that has to be done. And then they can go about doing their jobs within that process. The murkiness area is very bad for criminal justice system because the agencies are going to push the limits to do what they think is right. Most of the time, they're going to push the limits. And if you don't have a clear line of where those limits are, often people are going to go over the line, not realizing sometimes that they're even going over a line. But when the public finds out, they're like, oh my God, what are you doing? Having that clear line that the legislature sets is best for everyone, including good police. My last question for you is, who's opposing this bill, if anyone, down? You don't have necessarily name names, but is there strong opposition? What are they saying? What are their criticisms?
Well, thanks to the great work of the ACLU, we have neutralized most of the opposition we were getting from law enforcement. We found over the years that on all of these bills where we're trying to ensure constitutional civil liberties are protected, that law enforcement wants to make sure they can do their jobs, act fairly and completely also. Obviously, if there's an emergency situation, if a kidnapping, abduction, or hostage situation is at stake and there's no time to get a warrant, we make exceptions in the law for these sorts of exigent circumstances. We do not want to tie the hands of law enforcement here. What we want to do is ensure the basic civil liberties protections, and we have been able to find a balance here. We do have some remaining opposition from some of the tech companies. And the tech companies basically, in my experience, oppose any attempt to restrict the collection and utilization of data. They also often tend to push back against us requiring them to let you know when they're collecting, sharing, and selling your data. So we have kind of a ongoing battle with big tech in terms of what's your personal private data and what they can access for their own purposes. So that's a little outside the scope of this bill, but it is a battle that I'd love to talk with you about in the future, because that is one that is an important battle that we are still fighting.
Yeah, well, keep fighting it. It's amazing. It's amazing. I didn't think of big tech as being one of the opponents, but that makes sense. And as far as the policing, yes, I think these bills always have exigent circumstances, but they need to be forced to be able to articulate that. seek supervisor approval, and then those supervisors got to be on the line. Hey, you have to be able to articulate why you approve this, right? And so that there's got to be some oversight on that. And I know, looking at the omnibus criminal justice reforms that the Illinois General Assembly recently passed, which I'm elated about. Some of the police response, like I read some of the police vitriol coming from the Illinois Sheriff's Association and the Fraternal Order of Police here before I read what was actually in the bill. And I was like, wow, this seems like something I can't see the Illinois General Assembly going this far on things, and like making things like articulable. You got to articulate a reason why you do certain things, like turn off your body camera, or how you wrote a report that doesn't seem to reflect what's going on. Those to me seem only reasonable. Same thing with this bill. Like, yes, there's accidents circumstances, but you better be able to articulate the reason you did not use the formal process. And like you said, I think easily, there are some easy issues with kidnappings and other events where those are going to be very easy for law enforcement to be able to say, this is why we did it. And hopefully this bill restricts everything short of those few reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, when it comes to these requiring a warrant as technology advances, we've had good luck working with the Illinois State Police and the Illinois Sheriff's Association. They're, for the most part, I found to be very reasonable. They want to be able to do their jobs, but they understand that there is a line they don't want to cross. And so I found that they're very positive to work with, and they want to find that balance just like we do. So we'll keep pushing as new technologies develop, and who knows what they'll look like. We will continue to make sure that ordinary citizens' information is not accessed without a proper warrant. So I look forward to continuing this conversation.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Williams. Really appreciate it. If you want to find out more information, you can go to our website, or you can go to the ACLU's website, aclu-il.org, and under their legislation, and it's PHPA for the end of that link. But you should find out about it. Can you just tell us really quickly, what's the status of the bill in the General Assembly?
Well, we just finished a negotiated amendment which removes the opposition of law enforcement. So that amendment, which will get the ball rolling, will be up, I think, in committee as soon as tomorrow. So I expect we'll see the bill moving very quickly at that point. And so if you're listening and interested in the issue, let your legislator know that you support protecting privacy and personal household devices, and that you'd like a yes vote on it. Appreciate your help.
All right, everyone, get activated. Okay, thank you again, Representative Williams. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Welcome back. Thank you. Audio issue there. Okay. Once again, we want to thank Representative Ann Williams for sitting down with us. Fascinating discussion around this new bill. It's basically put up originally, I think, by the ACLU. They're the original drafters of it. It's definitely something that needs to pass. It's definitely something. It's definitely an issue around emerging technologies and the need for subpoenas, and how police and the justice system and the government collect this data that we create. It's something that the legislature is probably going to have to keep revisiting every couple of years, as the amount and types of data that we create and collect just explodes exponentially. Okay, next segment, foot pursuit. So there's a Sun Times article. I'm going to show you right here. Let me read the title for our podcast audience. Foot chases pose risks. Force officers to make decisions in the heat of pursuit. Experts. And for all those listening in the podcast, all the images and links we show are embedded in the post in the news section of our website when we post the podcast, so you can get them all there. Okay. The key to that headline is experts. Why did they put that in? Here's an interesting thing. They don't quote a single expert on foot pursuits in the entire article. Not a single one. That headline makes you think that they are, and that the people they are quoting are experts. They're not. For better or worse, they're not. So They basically quote three people, and it is Sheila Betty, if I'm pronouncing that right. She's a civil rights attorney at Northwestern University Law School. I know people that know her, think the world of her. She may be a phenomenal person, not an expert in foot pursuits at all. Zero, negative. Yes, foot pursuits, we've all read the news articles, and foot pursuits are risky, but not an expert. Not it. Next, we have Sharon Fairley, ex-chief administrator of the Independent Police Review Authority at the end of the organization, and she started up and transferred over to the Citizen Office of Police Accountability for a short time before running for governor, or no, lieutenant. I think she ran for lieutenant attorney general, but I'm not really sure there. Kind of foggy at this moment, but also is now at the University of Chicago Law School. You can go back into our archive, both on the podcast, but on YouTube and Facebook for sure. You can see our interview with her. She was on the show. Very, very, very smart woman. But once again, not an expert on foot pursuits. Wrong again. And then the last one is an ex-Dallas police chief. The article doesn't say anything about why this person is an expert in foot pursuits. Not every police chief is, not every officer is. There are people that study foot pursuits. There are people probably with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or the Police Executive Research Forum, or one, if not both of those organizations, could put you in touch with an expert immediately if they don't have them on staff. And the fact that you just kind of picked three random people, one a local civil rights lawyer, someone who ran IPA or COPA, they're all right. They're dangerous. Sharon Fairley even talks because she's smart and knows that she doesn't have authority on this issue, talks kind of around the question in very vague, and doesn't talk about this specific foot pursuit. It's because none of the three have expertise in the issue. And that's fine if you're going to just say local people and an ex-police chief weigh in on whether they think foot pursuits are dangerous, but citing experts in the title was just wrong. Period. They did it because they wanted you to think. They had consulted experts, and they were going to give you experts in the article, and you were going to go read that article for the expert opinion. You got none. It's not unlike to sometimes to do that. A little bit of a bait and switch on you, but none of the three are experts. They have opinions on whether they should be there. And by the way, this foot pursuit wasn't a bad one. The left keeps trying in Chicago to talk about how this was a bad foot pursuit. It wasn't. Responding to shots fired, 911 calls ShotSpotter. As they do with this, they look for people that are fleeing the scene. They spotted two in an alley, one with a gun. They chased the person with a gun. You don't know how many people are down from those shots. Maybe no one, maybe they hit a thing, maybe they fired in the air, maybe they killed three people. It is dangerous to pursue someone on foot. There's no doubt about it. If they were jumping in and out of yards and going around gangways, and a bunch of times they lost sight of Adam, actually if they lost sight of him maybe once, is that when you call the end of the foot pursuit. But running down an alley where you see him the entire time is not a dangerous foot pursuit. Does the foot pursuit policy in Chicago need to change? Absolutely. Would this be one of them? I doubt that this would be changed at all, no matter what changes they make. But it's typical of Chicago to demand change and then put in changes that won't impact the incident they're actually demanding change about. It's very typical. It's usually what aldermen do. They're very good at that. But really what Chicago really needs at this moment is expert opinion on whether or not that foot pursuit was good. And where else has this foot pursuit policies been altered? And in the jurisdictions where they're stricter, would this one still be good or bad? How would it be? Just claiming we need to change it, and then you make changes to the best practices in the country, and it wouldn't affect it. I don't think it would. I'm happy to be corrected if I am wrong. But the journalist needs to do their goddamn job and get that experts on foot pursuit policy quoted and review what happened here and talk about the changes in other places and give us the context we need. That didn't seem very important to the journalist. Just a manipulated headline was all they really needed to get the clicks. Okay, we're moving on to our next segment to talk about Representative LaShawn Ford's bill, I think, that has been introduced or is about to be introduced. Here is the article. The title: Lawmaker wants police officers taught how racism, ignorance prevent them from doing their jobs fairly. It talks about how they need to get classes. They're trying to mandate that every police officer in Illinois, current and future, get classes in critical race theory and get to know communities. And while not the worst idea, I don't think things like this are going to be the cure for racism. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think any of the officers that have been involved, like Chauvin in Minneapolis, the officer in outside of Minneapolis, I mean, they're just all over now, would have not shot the people they shot if they went through these classes. I think it feels good to think that these things are going to make a difference. I don't think they're going to. This is the same way I feel about when I hear former black police officers or black community members or black aldermen. Black aldermen is why I think we ended up with Eddie Johnson. Talk about how we need a black leader. And yeah, for diversity. But what we need what the CPD really needs is a game changer. One of those game-changing leaders to come in and change and break the culture. If that person's of color, all the better. But the idea that you're going to have a black leader, let's say Eddie Johnson or any other black superintendent, and a white cop who harbors racist ideas and racist thoughts is not going to act on them because he's worried about retribution from the black superintendent is just a joke. And it's been something that's been playing out in Chicago forever. They think that's going to be a difference, and it just isn't. I think Representative Ford, I may have him come on the show to talk about it. I think lawmakers have to start putting in bills like Illinois has done a little bit and really restrict the activities of police. And we got to start towards the reinvestment of funds or reallocation of funds that normally go for policing and stand up alternative responses and get police out of a lot of what they do. It's better for everyone, including the police department. Okay, we're going to be back in 1 minute after some information about our nation. Join a group of engaged and committed individuals advocating for transparency and accountability in the local justice system around the country. Get engaged through crowdsourced research projects, digital activism, public policy advocacy, or become a social media ambassador. Our criminal justice system will not reform itself. Communities must demand it. Transparency can be the fuel for justice our local communities need to combat the weaponizing of data by our justice system. Transformation of our justice system cannot occur until we know exactly what they are doing and who they are doing it to. Get involved today. CJP Nation. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Our next segment, it's an interesting saga for sure. Let me get you, here we go. Here's the title for our podcast audience again. As frustrations toward Chicago police mount, another attempt at reform stalls at City Hall. We're out of runway. This has to do with a lawsuit stemming from basically an Invisible Institute lawsuit regarding whether or not the CPD should be allowed to destroy records from investigations of police misconduct dating back from, I think, the 90s all the way into the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. It's a long saga. You can look it up online, or you can go to our YouTube channel and look up Jared Casaglad. We did an interview with him, and he's the lawyer that represents Charles Green, who's allegedly a wrongly convicted man. He's never won any kind of pardon or anything like that or clemency from the governor's office. And he's never gotten a ruling in a court to say he's wrongly convicted. The case definitely has a lot of questions. But it's around the filing of a Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA request, to try to get these records after the court said they can no longer be destroyed by law. And the city council, the police department, because they're kind of incompetent, never responded to his request in the required 5 days by law. That means if you don't do that, you can actually, the public body loses the ability to say the request is overly burdensome. And Casaglad won a court hearing at the trial court saying that, yes, the police department cannot claim overly burdensome and all the records have to be made available. I think the city's appealing that. There's been some talk of a settlement. There's been talk of the city offering Charles Green $500,000, the allegedly wrongly convicted guy, to drop the FOIA, because the FOIA was basically made, and I believe it's to some degree in his name. It's been back and forth for months. There's been movement out of the Finance Committee and Alderman Wagenspach and some of the city council members to actually create an ordinance that would mandate and release of those records, and to put a time table on it, and it would all go through the Inspector General's office to do that. This has been going back and forth for a long time. There are, let me just say, the mayor is like totally against it, totally against opening these records. It's it's going to cost probably a couple $1 million, if not more, to do it, I would bet. There have been varying estimates of like $500,000 to $5 or $10 million. Mayor Lightfoot's against it, thinks it's a useless waste of money. It's not going to help anything. To some degree, I think she's right in the fact that I don't think it's going to have a significant impact on deterring future misconduct. So in that frame, in that kind of sense, she's right. But she has to follow the law. The court ordered the records open, and they must provide them. The city needs to provide them, period. It has nothing to do with whether or not what impact it's going to have on the future. It's mostly for research for Jamie Calvin. It's mostly for research going backwards looking. And while that's always great, how much real effect it's going to have on the street and preventing future violence remains uncertain. And honestly, I have strong reservations will do anything like that. It may put the record straight on how bad the police accountability system was, and set the record straight on some officers' histories for brutality, but almost all of those people are long gone. So we'll see what it holds. We're going to keep following it. We'll send FOIAs in for one for every year. Those records are going to be open. Even though I partially agree with the mayor, those records are going to be open. Okay, our last segment today. It's an interesting one. It's about trust. It's unbelievable. Never know what you're going to get from a former police superintendent. So here's an article out of the Chicago Tribune. 2 former CPD chiefs blast city's rules for removing problematic cops as shooting victim seeks to reinstate a record $45 million award. Now, I'm not going to go in and give the history of this case, or this Individual who was shot by, I believe, an officer off duty was awarded $45 million at trial. The city argued on appeal they're not responsible for the off-duty activities of police. Then here come two white knights. Former Superintendent Jody Weiss, a former FBI agent, and former Superintendent Gary McCarthy. They sign a letter to the court, and they're basically saying, yes, you should reinstate this. The system is broken. Yes, the CPD and the city are responsible for what officers do off duty. That is hilarious. Hilarious. They're also complaining that they, as superintendents, didn't have the authority they needed to do what they needed to do around police accountability and separate the officers they needed to separate. So what Weiss and McCarthy are saying is the city of Chicago should empower superintendents, like trash the police accountability system, and trust the superintendents to do what's right and get rid of officers they want to get rid of. Yeah, that sounds pretty bad shit to me, to be honest with you. No, I don't trust either one of them. I don't trust anyone in that office. I never will. I don't care who's in the office. I don't trust them. No. We're not giving those more power. I understand the reservations. I understand the problems in the system, but giving them ultimate authority on everything's a joke. When Superintendent Phil Klein, who was the superintendent before Jody Weiss, in his waning days, a body was the name of the last name of the officer. I forgot his name. Officer Body got into an off-duty incident, and he beat, or tried to beat in the end because he was so drunk he couldn't do it, a bartender in Saginaw. No, I'm sorry. I think it was actually in the suburb of Niles. He did his best to beat up this woman. And he eventually gets ID'd. And he gets arrested after an outcry. The video goes public. One of his first court hearings is at the 25th District, Grand and Central, which also has a court. And that's where one of his first court, if not his first court hearing, is at. So, what happens? The court allows a body to be taken in the back door, the judge. And this makes the media pissed. They wanted the perp walk of the cop, and they're pissed. Plus, the officers on the job that day, during the hearing, are giving the media tickets. They're ticketing all their cars left and right because they're all parked illegally because they're piled up, going to be at this hearing. And the media goes ape shit over it. Klein, not wanting to seem that he had any part or would tolerate any part of covering up for a body, even though he covered up for so much misconduct, it's ridiculous. Look up the special operations section if you want to know more about what was covered up there during Phil Klein's time. He then tries to discipline and I believe fire the watch commander that's on at that time, the one who's in charge of the district and in charge of the officers on the street at that time, because he's saying it's his fault for walking a body in the back. It's his fault the cars got ticketed. So that watch commander had to go through all these internal proceedings to keep his job. And if the ultimate authority was just in the superintendent, bye, that guy's gone. Career's over. We're going to trust these people? So in the end, the gentleman who was appealing the $45 million award, had a 3-person panel from the appellate court review the case and overturn it. He attempted to request an en banc, I believe is how it's pronounced, where you get the whole appellate court to review it. That was denied. So they're not getting their settlement, at least it doesn't seem so now. And also, it looks like Weiss and McCarthy's letter had as much credibility with the appellate court as it did with us. All right. So that's our show for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Once again, if you want and are interested about finding out about our Nation project and working on collaborative projects with volunteers and interns all over the country, some international, actually, we have a couple from outside the country, just email us at info@chicagojustice.org and we will get back to you. And if you want to attend tonight. We have a meeting at 7 p.m. Central, so drop us an email soon. We'll give you the Zoom link. Thank you all. Have a great day. We'll see you Friday at 5:30.